There's a war going on out there. Blade, myself, we kill as many of them as we can find. Part human, part immortal.
I know all about you. Daywalker.
He alone has the power of both worlds.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars and welcome to another classic film review. Today it is a Marvel classic film review and I'm taking a look at the 1998 Marvel film Blade. The film is directed by Stephen Norrington and it stars, of course, Wesley Snipes, Stephen Dorff, Chris Christopherson and Bushy Wright, Donald Logue and Udo Kier. Right, Blade. The film focuses on the half-vampire, half-mortal Blade, played by Wesley Snipes, who essentially is known as the Daywalker in the vampire world. He has all their strengths and none of their weaknesses. And he has made it his mission in life, along with Whistler, his elderly comrade, who makes the weapons for him. He and Whistler have been travelling around, killing as many vampires as they can. They come across Deacon Frost, played by Stephen Dorff, who is an upcoming vampire who doesn't follow the rules of the vampire world. He wants to unleash a vampire god upon the world, and it's up to Blade to stop him. Right, what are my thoughts on Blade? Well, I think it's sometimes hard to remember just how good Blade is, which might sound silly to many of you who are watching this, who are obviously have seen Blade and have been a big fan of Blade. I think the superhero genre now, I think it's fair to say, is getting pretty tired. And it's constantly being, especially with the Marvel films, and to some degree the DC films as well, being diluted down by, and they're kind of losing their impact and they just feel like, CGI messes for the most part, many of them. But Blade was and is a very, very important film. I mean, it practically saved Marvel at the time, I think, if memory serves, because they were really in trouble financially, and this film kind of, kept them afloat. It was a film that was made without boundaries, if you like. They just, they tried to stay as true to the source material as they could. Obviously, they made changes for the screen here and there. And it heralded in an age of massively popular superhero films, because this came after Batman and Robin in 97, I believe that was, or something like that, which was, even though it was financially successful, Batman and Robin, it was hated by critics and many audiences, apart from little kids. So it had everything going against it, this film, really. And it was just so refreshing and brilliantly made. It was very, very successful, and obviously spawned 2 sequels, which I am going to cover on this channel. And then after this, obviously, we got like the X-Men, we got Spider-Man, and then, the 2000s was, a golden age, if you like, for superhero films. And then obviously later in the noughties, we got Iron Man, and then it was off to the races, really. So I think it's a lot of people, conveniently forget just how important this film was. It was massively important. But even if you put that to one side and just look at it as a film, it's a brilliant film too. I don't care, and I'll have this argument till I'm blue in the face. As Christopher Reeve, for me, is Superman. Yes, I like Henry Cavill as Superman. I think, I think there have been a lot of Supermen that, do a decent job, but Superman is Christopher Reeve. And I think you can make that same argument for Blade. Blade is Wesley Snipes. He embodies this character. You could argue by the time he got to the 3rd film, he'd taken it a little bit too far. But he is absolutely spectacular as Blade. Physical, the physicality he brings to the role, obviously with his martial arts skills and his, the choreography and the physicality he brings. He's just wonderful. And then he's got that on-screen charisma as well that we've seen many, many times with Wesley Snipes in Demolition Man and other stuff. The screen likes him, the camera likes Wesley Snipes, so it certainly did. And he brings the acting prowess, but also the physicality to the role, and they just gel. And it's the role of his life, really. I think Blade, and he's just absolutely wonderful. Also, as well, the film has a credible villain here, Stephen Dorff as Deacon Frost. At times, you could argue, is a little bit pantomime, but he's a villain with a plan. He sees himself as being right, all this kind of stuff. He thinks he's doing things for the right reasons for his species, if you like, the vampires. So I quite enjoy his character here, and he's played very, very well by Stephen Dorff. Chris Christopherson as Whistler. What a brilliant addition to the world of Blade. And Chris Christopherson absolutely nails it as this grizzled veteran who found Blade as a 13-year-old, confused as to what he was, and he took him under his wing. And there's this father and son bond between them. And the scene between them where it would appear that Whistler has been killed or he's dying is actually quite touching, and it's played really, really brilliantly. And then also we get an addition here of Nobushi Wright as Karen, who is like, she works at the hospital, and we see her get bitten by Quinn at the beginning, and Blade and Whistler kind of take her under the wing. She becomes actually quite an important part of the team and the film. And I actually think, she's a really, really good addition here. So the film has everything, really. It's got some fun moments. The action is outstanding. The special effects, for the most part, are really, really good. Some of the CGI effects haven't stood the test of time, it's fair to say, but it doesn't detract from the greatness of the film, in my opinion. Interestingly, as well, but doing a bit of research on the film before I decided to film the review, Wesley Snipes essentially was always the number one choice here, but under consideration for the role as well was apparently Denzel Washington and Lawrence Fishburne. That would have been interesting, either of them. Denzel Washington, we've obviously seen from the Equalizer films, has the physicality to do action, so that would have been interesting. Same with Fishburne, we saw him in the Matrix films as well, so it would have been interesting to see either of those in the role, but as I've said, Wesley Snipes is Blade, so it just works. Jet Li apparently was offered the part of Deacon Frost, but he chose to do Lethal Weapon 4 instead. I can't imagine Jet Li doing the Stephen Dorff character of Deacon Frost. It really needed someone with a lot of charisma and able to deliver lines in a very, very charismatic way, and I just couldn't see Jet Li doing that at that stage in his career anyway. There's obviously the ending is much discussed of this film, because the original ending was that Stephen Dorff was going to turn into the La Magra character, this blood god, and like a scene was filmed where he kind of turned into this big blob of a character that just didn't work. The CGI didn't work, and it just wasn't scary, and it did, and test audiences didn't like it. So they changed it, obviously, to the sword fight scene that we get at the end with Blade and Deacon Frost. So it feels a tad unfocused at the end. It's almost like they just didn't know exactly how to finish the film, but they just managed, I think, to stick the landing here. So it's, for me, I think it's an absolute classic Marvel film, this. I've always been a huge fan of the Blade movies. I like all of them. Obviously, the third one is the weakest of the three. I think there's nobody going to argue differently, I don't think. And there's obviously a lot of people out there who will argue that Blade 2 is the strongest of the three. I would probably agree with that, but the first one is just so wonderful. I think both 1 and 2, really, there's a nice debate to be had about which is the best film. And for me, I think they just both stand on their own 2 feet anyway. They're both just so good and so entertaining. But from my perspective, I really, really love the Blade film. I am interested to see him appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I just know it'll be a massively tame and watered down version of the character. If they go R-rated as they did with this Blade, full of swearing, full of blood, electric fight scenes, vicious at times. If they tame it down for a younger audience, the new Blade is, well, it's going to be rubbish, isn't it? You know. So I am cautiously optimistic about Blade appearing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I think we all know it ain't going to be comparable to the original Blade, and I think that is a fair comment. So thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for joining me for this classic Marvel review. I will obviously revisit the other two films and get reviews up for those on the channel as soon as I can, and stick with me for plenty more content very, very soon.